Hi, everybody. I'm always very happy to host EUROSTUDENT Talks webinar, and I'm especially happy when we can share really fresh data with you. And today is the day, because today our focus is on Czech Republic and its results of EUROSTUDENT 8, so really the current round. We will look both at longer trends as well as changes and shifts that have been visible when we compare EUROSTUDENT 7 and EUROSTUDENT 8. So there is definitely really interesting facts to look forward. And to cover this topic, I'm absolutely glad to have here two wonderful ladies, Lucy Hundlova and Mihaela Shmidova. They have both been speakers at EUROSTUDENT Talks before, so they are already experienced. They know what to look forward to today. And of course, we are absolutely happy to welcome all our speakers back once they have new findings that they would like to share. So that's what we're going to do today. For those who haven't seen our previous webinar with Lucy and Mihaela, I will very briefly introduce them. So Lucy Hundlova has worked in Czech Center for Higher Education Studies over 10 years. Her work has focused on the attitudes and living conditions of students at Czech universities, and she is mainly interested in the topics of non-traditional students and working while studying. Lucy has participated in several surveys focused on students at Czech higher education institutions, for example, EUROSTUDENT, PhD students in the Czech Republic, and students preparing for teaching professions. And the EUROSTUDENT 8 is the first round of the survey where Lucy has participated as a researcher. And our second speaker, Mihaela Shmidova, has studied general anthropology at Charles University in Prague. Her main research topics are students' values, dropout in higher education institutions, non-traditional students, and outside of the higher education area, also prejudices in the Czech society. She deals with quantitative as well as qualitative research. And for Mihaela, the 8th round of EUROSTUDENT is her second experience with the project. So hello to both of you. I'm very, very happy to have you here. And seems so that I am done with my introduction and you can start with your presentation. We are already eager to hear everything.
Thank you, Marlene. Hello, everyone. So I will share the presentation. So I hope everyone can see it.
Yeah, it works.
Okay, thank you. So as Marlene has already said in the introduction, we are going to present today the main results and challenges arising from EUROSTUDENT 8 in the Czech Republic. When we were asked to present on February talks, we have decided not to focus on one specific topic, but to present the main results, highlights, and challenges from the Czech 8 wave. So firstly, we will present the trends that have remained more or less stable over time, then trends which undergone shifts and changes compared to the last wave. Thirdly, there are areas that appeared for the first time in the survey in thematic modules, so we will mention them. And at the end, we will mention the challenges arising from the survey. Before we begin with the results, just shortly about the Czech sample. In the current 8th wave of the survey, data collection was conducted as a census. And we used the central survey tool, which is provided by ResearchNet. The entire process of preparation of the survey together how to address the students was carried out by research team Czech with cooperation with Ministry of Education. But the actual sending of the emails and reminders was carried out by the universities themselves. At the beginning, there was an ambition to use contact details from student register, but it didn't work out. So a little bit more about it in the challenges. Students were contacted by email, and maximum of 2 reminders were sent by email. More about it in the part of challenges, how limiting it was. And shortly about the sample, approximately 240,000 students were addressed, and nearly 15,000 of questionnaire were analyzed. The response rate was quite low, it was 6.2%. So to the first topic. It's the transition to higher education. I would say it's one of the main topics of EUROSTUDENT. It's important in the context of European policies of equity and inclusive higher education. The topic answers many questions regarding the educational pathway of students, openness of educational system, etc. And there is one of the indicator of EUROSTUDENT survey. It's the transition time between leaving secondary school and entering university. The values on the indicator remain the same or nearly the same in EUROSTUDENT 7 and EUROSTUDENT 8. So there is no big change. On average, we can say that 9 out of 10 respondents didn't interrupt their educational path, and we can call the Czech higher education student as a traditional one. And this can be seen in the international comparison as well. The graph I present here, I borrowed from synopsis of indicators from EUROSTUDENT 7. The graph shows duration of transition from secondary school to higher education. And the Czech Republic, together with Greece, France, Luxembourg, and Slovenia, belong to the group of countries with the highest proportion of students with uninterrupted educational pathways. But it's true that across all EUROSTUDENT countries, the majority of students entered higher education within a period of 2 years after leaving the secondary school. Now we will look at the new data from EUROSTUDENT 8, Czech EUROSTUDENT. The graph shows us a direct and delayed transition by different groups of students. If you look at the results by different group of students, there are not so big differences. There are differences, but not so big. And we find different educational pathway more often among students with lower socioeconomic backgrounds. These are the students with no tertiary education, not well-off parents, and especially these students are the part-time students who interrupted their studies. It's 42% of these students. So let's move to another topic, educational background. It's a very close topic, I would say. Educational background has a strong influence on educational career of students. Those without tertiary educated parents, they are more likely to have entered higher education with a delay through alternative routes. They are in bachelor with part-time status. And what's the proportion of students with and without higher education background? The graph I borrowed from the synopsis of indicators again. It's EUROSTUDENT 7, and the graph shows educational attainment of students' parents. And as you can see, on average, slightly more than half of students' parents hold a tertiary degree. And if you look at the red circle, the Czech Republic, together with Malta, Croatia, Poland, and Luxembourg, they belong to the group of countries with higher percentage of students whose parents have not attended the tertiary education. And now again, the Czech data from EUROSTUDENT 8 and the educational background. In EUROSTUDENT 7, more than half of the students have been without the tertiary background, while in EUROSTUDENT 8, more than half of students have had tertiary background. So there has been a slight shift. And we can see that most of them, part-time students, have no tertiary background. It looks like in our Czech higher education system it looks like that the higher education system in the Czech Republic is not open, but actually we are in the universal phase of higher education when we speak with the terminology of Martin Rowe. And I think that we need to see the reality in broader context. So that's why we present here the results from the last 8 national censuses. Considering the educational structure of Czech society, the group of students without tertiary background still represent approximately half of all students. And what happened in last decades, there was a massive decrease in share of people with primary education and increase in the share of people with higher education. And the increase in the share of people with the tertiary education occurred mainly in last 2 decades of the 21st century. And therefore, the share of part-time students without a tertiary background is so high. And there is another question, maybe, how many students from different type of secondary schools go to university, enter the higher education, because there are differences between the general secondary school and vocational secondary school. So it's another topic. And just very, very shortly, fields of study and educational background. I just wanted to demonstrate that educational background has a great importance. We can see that there are differences in fields of study regarding educational background. Students without tertiary background, they are more likely to be studying subjects in the field of welfare, services, and education. And students with tertiary background, they are more likely to be studying subjects in the field of medicine, dental studies, architecture and town planning, pharmacy, psychology, and ICT. And I would like to point out that especially in the medical fields, the family educational patterns are inherited, as you can see. Another topic, public support. The level of public support for students in their studies in the Czech Republic is very low, and it means that there is a need for support from families and the need to have a job. This is a long-term phenomenon. And when we speak about the financial support in the Czech higher education system, what does it actually mean? We have to mention that state pays the social and health insurance. It is a public support, but it's not reflected in the results. And the public support in the survey, it includes 3 types of allowances. These are the accommodation, means-vested allowances, and merit-based scholarship. And these grants, these scholarships, are administered by the university, and the sources from which they are paid are public. And currently, what's happening in the Czech Republic, it's a few weeks ago, a month ago, a debate regarding support for university students began. It's about repayable students' loan. It's really new information, so we will see what will happen in next months. So the debate has just started. And back to EUROSTUDENT, what are the sources of student income? For the purpose of the analysis, EUROSTUDENT divides income into 4 categories. It's family, self-earned income, public, and other. And on the basis of the EUROSTUDENT data, we can calculate the dependency on income source. And as you can see in the table, more than half of the students are dependent on family. Nearly 40% of students are dependent on self-earned income, and less than 1% of students are dependent on public student support. So as you can see, public support is it represents a marginal source of income. It's quite interesting to look at the different groups of students according to the dependence on each financial source. As we saw, the students are mainly dependent on family and on self-earned income, but who is most dependent on what source? Most dependent on self-earned income are part-time students, master students, students with not well-off parents. And most dependent on families are long master students, full-time students, students with well-off parents, and students with tertiary education background. So we can see that the socioeconomic background really matters. And international comparison. The graph we present here, we borrowed from the synopsis of indicators, EUROSTUDENT 7 again. And this graph is very useful because it combines two dimensions. The first one is the share of recipients of public supports, the x-axis. And the second is the public support as a share of recipients' total monthly income. So when we look at the graph and at EUROSTUDENT 7 results, we can see that 42% of students received national public student support. And this type of support represented 42% of the recipients' income, monthly income. When we look at the right lower quadrant, there are 3 countries, Czech Republic among them, and we can see that the share of recipients in this lower quadrant is above the international average, while the share of public support in total income is below the average. The Czech Republic is are the red dots, and I would like to say that we put in this graph the results from the Czech EUROSTUDENT 8 for comparison. So what does it actually mean when to have a public support in the Czech Republic as a student? That means that 46% of students have accommodation allowances, but they get 24 euros per month. 1% of students have a social support, so these students get 83 euros per month. And 9% of students have a merit-based scholarship, so they get 40 euros per month. And another topic, working while studying. The Czech Republic has been one of the countries with the highest share of students who have paid work during their studies. Paid work during studies is at a very high level, which is true for its extent and intensity. And it's both, it applies both for part-time and full-time students, that working while studying is a common part of their lives. And we can see that that there is a comparison between EUROSTUDENT 7 and 8 in which from the Czech data. 90% of students, part-time students, work during the lecture period, and 60% of full-time students work during the lecture period. So as you can see, the numbers have not changed much since last week. And let's have a look at the results from EUROSTUDENT 8 and different group of students. We can see that 70% of students worked during the lecture period, and in EUROSTUDENT 7 it was 72%. So it's a slight shift to a lower level of working students. And we have to see that we can see that part-time students work really a lot, because part-time form of study in the Czech Republic, it's represent a flexible form of education in the Czech Republic. For these students, it's easier to balance their study, professional life, family life. So, and these students are mainly older, working parents. Yeah, so that's part-time students. Now about the intensity. As we have said, part-time students work mostly of their time, and we can see that only 6% of them don't work. When we compare them to full-time students, full-time students don't work in more than 1/3 of them. One third of them don't work during the lecture period. If we don't take into account part-time students and full-time students, we can see that master degrees, students in master degree work both most frequently and most intensively. These students, 31% of these students work more than 20 hours per week. And now the reasons for working. The reasons for working in the survey were presented to the students in 5 different statements. The strongest agreement among students was with the statement, I work so I can afford things I otherwise would not buy. Nearly 80% of students agreed with the statements. And another statement, without my paid job, I could not afford to be a student. This statement can be described as the necessity of working while studying. And nearly 1/3 of all working students agreed with this statement. It applies mostly for part-time students, but for example, for students with impairment as well. And on the other hand, students in long master's programs work least often for these reasons, 18% of them. And last topic from this first group of results, housing accommodation. Housing, it's an important part of study framework. In the Czech Republic, housing is expensive, especially in Prague and big regional cities. And the fact is that affordable housing is problematic for students. At first, we will look at the housing situation in Europe, in EUROSTUDENT 7, and the position of Czech Republic. We can see that across all countries, about 1/3 of students lived with their parents, 17% lived in a student's accommodation, and 25% with partner. And we can see that more students from the Czech Republic have lived with partner, but less with parents. And now we will look at the EUROSTUDENT age results. We can see the distribution of different groups of students by type of housing. And in average, and in comparison with the last wave, more students have lived with parents and less students in student accommodation. And accommodation at parents' house is mostly used by full-time students and bachelors. That means these are the youngest students. And living with partner is mostly common for part-time students and for students in master's. So these are the mostly older students. And the last slide of housing, it's about the housing costs. In the long term, the Czech Republic is one of the countries with the highest proportion of students who are burdened by housing costs. EUROSTUDENT uses a special indicator. It's the share of students whose accommodation cost represents 40% or more of total monthly income. And we can see that the indicator is the same for the EUROSTUDENT 7 and 8th wave. 38% of students spend 40% or more of total monthly income on accommodation. And mostly these students are the students who study in long national master, students with financial difficulties, and students with impairment. So these students are at risk. On the other hand, part-time students, master students, and students living with parents spend the least on accommodation. Okay.
And now we will move from the, let's say, stable findings or results of EUROSTUDENT in the Czech Republic to the results which are somehow different, or where we can see some shifts in comparison in time. We will start with financial difficulties. When comparing EUROSTUDENT 8 and EUROSTUDENT 7, we can see that in the Czech Republic there is a shift from 20 to 26% in both waves, and most acute situation, or the most part of the students who are influenced by by financial difficulties, is visible for those who live in halls of residence, and also for students with impairment. You can see these two groups which are assigned with the blue and yeah, blue arrow, and the red one is average. So but when we saw the graph, we can see that increase, which I was talking about before, fits for all groups. There is only maybe small exception, or not so big increase, which is connected with, again, those special students who attend higher education as part-time students. So these are the increase is not so big, from 20 to 23%. It is important to add some kind of national context into this information. Of course, when we ask the students in EUROSTUDENT 8, students and the whole society was tackling with emerging problems in the economy. And of course, there were big negative expectations of society. But I believe that the whole situation, the whole Europe was in similar situation in those days when the field or collecting the data was on track. And for EUROSTUDENT context, it's usually so that financial difficulties are connected with pressure on additional employment. Of course, in the Czech Republic, as we heard before, is one of the countries where working while studying is most common thing. But this is something what is stable. But I think that it can be also connected with mental health problems, emerging mental health problems. When you are pushed to not only study but also to support yourself by additional employment, it is also somehow problematic for your mental health potentially, of course. Another shift in findings is connected with study condition, or I would say with self-evaluation of study performance. This is another very, let's say, traditional indicator within the EUROSTUDENT. The shift is, to be honest, not very big, but especially when we compared the data sets from as a whole, data sets, for example, from EUROSTUDENT 7 and EUROSTUDENT 8 in the Czech Republic, that the shift is not such a big. But when we have a look on different groups of students on EUROSTUDENT 8, we can see that especially students with impairment more often evaluate their performance as worse to other students. So it's almost it's actually 25%. So it's 1/4 of those who have impairment. this is the biggest, let's say, the biggest. This group is the mostly endangered. But there is a, to be honest, we didn't find a linear significance in the relation with our spend in job. It means that if you work, it doesn't. It is not possible to connect your working hours during the study and your self-evaluation. It's not linear significance in the more hours in job, worse self-evaluation in studying. And these students with impairment, we had some kind of hypothesis that higher proportion of students with impairment who self-evaluate as worse is connected also with the situation when there are much more students with impairment in the whole Czech data set. I will show you next slides how these impairments or these issues with impairment has changed in between both ways. So this is the self-evaluation of study performance. And now we are moving about to mental health problems, which I was mentioned before just a few seconds. You can see big differences in between both ways. While in EUROSTUDENT 7, there was 72% students with no impairments at all. In EUROSTUDENT 8, it's only 57%. And now the first row in a graph, these are mental health problems. And we can see that in 8th wave of the EUROSTUDENT, the prevalence of problems related to mental health more than doubled. So this is really striking shift, let's say. A national context for this is somehow in many ways positive because there is not, we can not judge that the increase of mental health problems in the society means that there are more people in society with these mental problems, but there is a much more open society to hear your problems. So people are not afraid to speak about their problems, and they are, of course, more visible. So we can, after the COVID, especially situation, we can see in the whole society and also in the population of students some kind of shift in mind. So people are more open to speak about their mental health problems. But on the other hand, there is still but there is a much more urgence for capacities on mental health from the side of mental health professional. And then now it's more and more visible that these professionals are something what is could be paid by the gold, but it's still there is a really big lack of capacities of these professionals. So that's not only the problem of students but the whole society. Another, let's say, more detailed view on mental health problems in our data. Among those who have their impairments, there are many people, or actually more than 2/3 of students reporting mental health. They have or depression or anxiety disorder. So this graph you can see shows us these two types of mental health problems. The red line represents average counts or numbers for the whole data set, Czech data set. You can see that in the circle, for example, there is a statement which is connected with dropout probability. I am seriously thinking of completely abandoning my higher education studies, and you can see that those who declare that they have kind of anxiety disorder or depression, they tend to answer that they agree with this statement almost, or not almost, but more than 2 times often than the average in our data set. And you can see that there are really big differences between averages and those people with anxiety disorder and depression. So mental health, of course, has its serious impacts on belonging to the study, on satisfaction with lecturers, etc., etc. Now we will move to something what is completely new for the EUROSTUDENT as a whole. We took participation also in special ad hoc models, let's say. And from these models, we also found some kind of very interesting findings, which can be maybe starting of new trends in population of society. We will see if these models will be also in the next wave of EUROSTUDENT. But for now, I would like to show or share with you impacts of COVID learning style on current situation in learning for students. It means study condition, learning online or in person. We had a question on current situation regarding modus for learning completely person and completely online was let's say the both how to say ends of the axis. And you can see that students have different ideas about to extent to which online learning in the post-pandemic era should be part of mainstream learning. There is a big or significant mismatch between those current situation and ideal ratio, while 14% of students now experience a combination of in-person and online learning. Ideally, it would be 32% of them. National context for us was COVID kind of in this way. I'm exaggerating, of course, miracle, because for online learning, it made many good or did big development in online learning in the Czech higher education system. Actually, development of distance learning and especially online forms of learning was or is still one of the priorities of the strategic plan for higher education system in the Czech Republic, which starts to be to be applied from 2021. So we can see that pandemic distance online learning was for very driving force, and if there would not be a, let's say, COVID, we would not expect such a big development of these things. But you can see that it applied only for the start of or beginning of validity of this higher education strategic plan, because now schools or higher education institution they move a little bit back down from they are not so eager for other developing of online learning. So that's the study condition. And another interesting thing about the, let's say, that mismatch, we try to make some, or we followed some kind of artificial indicator. Those we can, because I think that it has a sense to compare different study fields, because these are very visible. And now, again, we can speak about especially students from study fields of pharmacy, medicine, and delta studies. I have to add that these study fields, they have the highest study intensity from all study fields, more than actually 50 hours a week. And they now currently, they in almost 2/3 of them, they would prefer to have more incorporated online learning in their current style of learning. But now they move again to the classical in-person learning they know from many years ago. So that's this is a really big dissatisfaction of students, especially those study fields. But again, there is no simple pattern. It doesn't mean that the greater of intensity of study means the greater mismatch between online and in-person learning. So that's about learning online in person and discrimination in the context of study. Again, it is very important for us, for our Czech society and population of students. In the graph, you can see the graph of general experience of discrimination regardless of type and originator, again by study fields. Generally, we can say that less than a quarter of students had a personal experience with some kind of specific or particular type of discrimination during the study. In the questionnaires, there was many types of concrete or specific kind of discrimination, and in the Czech Republic, the most common type of discrimination in the context of study is gender discrimination. And if we back or return to the graph, medicine, dental studies, architecture, and town planning are study fields where general experience of discrimination is most common. I believe that it could be similar also in different countries than it is in the Czech Republic, but these study fields are usually connected with very high demands on students, and also there is a not very good climate in especially, for example, for women, if they study, for example, medicine. This is not what is traditionally open for the woman student. So that's maybe why they speak so often about discrimination in the context of study. Again, national context, we saw thanks to this data that the situation of students' psychological problems and discrimination needs to be addressed more intensively and more effectively. It should be, for example, in the form of developing of appropriate type of counseling directly in the higher education institution. I see at many higher education institutions, universities, colleges, there are actually quite strong men and women who works in these kind of counseling bodies. But as I told before, there is a lack of capacities in the area of psychology. And on the other hand, there should be also systematic support for this type of counseling from the let's say policymakers. We still see that there is a lack of supportive, for example, programs which should or could support the development of such capacities. And the last slide from our today presentation concerns methodological challenge. Or today we would like to speak about one of, not many, but some of challenges we are facing a very long time. And this is something what for us have increasing urgency, and it is low response rate, which is, as we know, not a problem or only a problem in the Czech Republic specifically. According to our national experience, in our case, the low response rate is also linked to the lack of promotion of the survey, not only like results of the survey, but also prior to data collection. So we know that the promotion of the survey and other practical information is something what is often mentioned by the EUROSTUDENT Consortium, and we know what that there should be something done, and we have good examples of some countries where some good steps were done. But still, in the Czech Republic, we feel some kind of lacking behind. For us, is possible solution how to change that negative trend in lowering response rate is to try use of administrative data in our national system. It means to use email context from national database of students, which is currently not possible, as Lucia told before. there was some GDPR issue. So we had to work on how to use adequately public interest law in the Czech situation. It would be possible to change this situation. We hope that if we will be lucky for the next wave, use of administrative data, and it means the email contacts will be hopefully we can hope used. It has another good point or positive effect that if we use administrative data, we would greatly simplify and streamline outreach to students. So it means that we will be also able to, for example, send more reminders and to verify if sending of more reminders will really leave will channeled into better, for example, response rate than we have now. And of course, the reduction of staff capacity for the purpose of reaching the target groups directly, because higher education institutions, they need to ask themselves, their students, and of course, in a case when many online questionnaires are addressed to students not each year, but each month, it's the field is not very good for other and even national questionnaires. So if we were able to address directly the target group or students, it would be much more better, not only for us, but also for staff in higher education institutions. So that's all. Thank you. And we are looking forward to your questions, if any.
Thank you, Michaela, and thank you, Lucy. I think it's very fruitful presentation, and there is a lot to discuss. But first of all, I think that before I can start with my questions, I will open the mic for our audience, and please, you can add your question to the chat, or you can just raise your hand and let us know that you would like to ask or comment. It's very, very welcome. So if anybody has any questions or comments. So until our audience is coming up with their questions, I actually think I will start from the end. You mentioned this lack of promotion of the survey as one of the challenges, and you mentioned it at the state level context. But I, of course, have a half selfish question in that sense that what do you see? What could be done at the international level of EUROSTUDENT, for example, by the consortium maybe, or in cooperation with other participating countries to promote the survey and really to support countries who are in EUROSTUDENT, that they really take it seriously, that they see benefit in participating? Is there any steps that could be taken? What do you think?
I am afraid that I will not be able to define particular steps, but my experience from working in EUROSTUDENT is such. We as a researchers, we had a big support for, let's say, developing of our skills or competencies, how to speak with policymakers. I remember some kind of workshops during our Malta session last year. So we have quite a big and constant support from the side of consortium, from that international level above us. But to be honest, maybe it's our mistake. I don't know, maybe lack of communication, but we don't know much about activities from the side of consortium towards those policymakers, those people who are responsible from ministries or these kind of bodies on national levels. And I believe that we will have a final conference in July in Vienna. And if I remember correctly, there should be also included these people from ministries and these similar bodies. So, but I think that also during the maybe the one from wave to wave when we are on the track, collecting, analyzing, and preparing reports. We should be more in contact with those people, maybe in such. And also, maybe it would be helpful if we knew as a researchers more about what is done for policymakers, let's say, in easily way. So, but maybe it's only only our national national experience that we don't know have much information from the side of ministry on that national level. Maybe there is a problem. I am not able to say it. Where is that?
But I think it's a good point that maybe bringing together those people from different backgrounds would somehow also encourage these activities in the project, or at least maybe bringing people to the same page in that sense. That
to be more in like participation together in these things, like.
Okay, there is also one question in the chat about mental health. Katarina is asking that the increase in students with mental health issues is quite stunning in many countries, not only in Czech Republic. How are support providers at universities or external public or private providers coping with this increase? And is there a public debate taking place about these issues?
Yeah, debate is quite, how to say, big for maybe 2 years. I can also mention that we had a big research on specifically on mental health problems in between students, not only in higher education but as well in secondary and primary schools. And I would say that the problems or people with these problems are really big part of society or big part of population of students and pupils. So everybody is talking about it. Some kind of steps were done, but still it's not enough, I would say. As I said before, I know better situation in higher education institutions. I know that almost each university or college, they have their own center for this kind of consultation and counseling, and even they are pushing the threatened students to real professional, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. But generally, there are lack of these professionals in not only for students but as for the whole society. We had big problems with, for example, hospitals for really bad types of these mental health for young people, especially because that's the specific problem. They cannot stay with adults in same hospital, for example. It's a very particular thing. Yeah, but I see that the fact that we know much more about how the problem is big, and it's also visible in media. So I think that politicians and policymakers, they are now very like forced to do something. So that's what I can add to the question. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I correct answered correctly for this, but I think that this is the main point.
Thank you. Any other questions from the? Yeah, there is one question. How are the discussions with the Ministry of Education or other parties going? Are they listening to the data and willing to take some actions to better the situation for university students? And as well, do you think the students' loans would be an effective step to help?
So, first question, discussion with the Ministry of Education is quite complicated because many other more important issues are priorities for ministry, especially. It's the one thing, maybe because the education area is so complicated and currently faces so many problems that the question of EUROSTUDENT survey and its promotion and better communication of results or collecting data is very least priority. I am completely honest. They are, of course, trying to listening the data, but I think that it's also nothing new that we had a problem with it's like kind of implementation of findings or results from EUROSTUDENT. It's not only the 8th or 7th way, but it goes more into the past. But I know good examples of we know good examples of working with findings on the level of universities. Some of them, they are using it as a kind of really trend things, because EUROSTUDENT is not so good for institutional level itself, but it is very good about when we speaking about big trends or big shifts or big things which are happening in the whole system. And student loans, if you would like.
Okay, about student loans, as I have mentioned them, we are quite happy that some of the debate about the support for students in higher education has begun. I think it's a good thing at first. And the reason for introducing the students' loan was, the main reason was to help students with financial difficulties. So we think that, in our opinion, it could help, because there are a lot of students with financial difficulties, and if you have to work during the studies, and on the other hand, you could have a loan, it could be helpful, I think, in my opinion.
But of course, the devil is in detail, if it is also possible to say in English. But yeah, it's very important how that repayable student loan will look like in each point. It must be very, it is not easy way how to implement it in a way you would like to to be better. Yeah, for especially for students with financial problems or difficulties, or people who are, for example, from regions which are not so close to Prague or to Brno, which are more connected, for example, with a region, and they don't want to go to study several hundreds kilometers away, if I say. So it can also motivate those people, but also it can, in ideal case, it can also lead to smaller pressure on students to work during the study. I don't know. In ideal situation, yeah, that's it.
Always the question about the implementation, how it really will be designed, the loan system. Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments before we wrap it up? It has already been a very nice and fruitful discussion. Maybe from my side, the last question is about this distance learning. You mentioned that there is quite a stunning difference about between the ideal ratio, how much in person and how much online or hybrid formats should be used, and what is the situation actually in reality in higher education institutions. And you also mentioned that the development of distance learning methods is one of the priorities of the strategic plan of higher education. But I was wondering, what about the resources and what about the readiness of higher education institutions, for example, but also of lecturers? It's a plan, it's a vision, it's an aim, but what about really the availability of resources and also are different target groups ready for the change?
Resources are always problems, but I would say that the more attention is now paid to overall competencies of lecturers, and among them also their competencies to learn or to teach online. I would say it's something also very new for us. They, for example, during the COVID, lecturers they started to use, for example, software things like Microsoft Teams and Microsoft generally used for educators. It was spread over the whole universities, and people they were just forced to actively to use it. But now it seems that on the level of higher education institutions, some kind of researching of competencies of lecturers is starting to be supported. And regarding, let's say, software or soft things are not so complicated, even if they are not still systematically supported. But the biggest problem, of course, as always, is hardware, if I could say. So not each, for example, lecture room has ideal things for, or yeah, things for IT things for sharing lectures with people who are not at the place. But this is, I think, also the question of good planning, because not every lecture room has to have these things. So I am looking forward to more researches which are focused on academicians and their competencies to teach, and of course competencies to teach online. So but there is still kind of conservatism among them. They rather teach the way how they are used to teach for many years, especially older academicians. They have no big motivation to change their style of teaching. So, but I see some good improvements on the level of universities.
Yeah, indeed. Let's stay hopeful then.
Yeah.
There are already comments in the chat as well that thank you very much for the results. They're very interesting, and so were your insights into the current developments. And it's definitely something I would like to emphasize as well, that we are very grateful that you agreed to join us here today and share your findings. It's always very interesting to see fresh results. I think that there haven't been more questions or comments, so it's also time to wrap it up. Once again, many thanks to you, and also thanks to our listeners for your active participation and asking and commenting. And everybody can already save the 14th of March in their calendars. It's the next EUROSTUDENT Talks taking place. And we will turn our eyes to Norway. So again, new fresh results, and you can stay tuned about the exact topic, but the country and the speaker have already been confirmed. So 14th of March it will be. So thank you once again, Lucy and Mihaela. It was a pleasure to have you, and thanks to everybody else as well. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Goodbye.